So we're back again with Jared Shaner, who's athletic director at Dixon High School, and he's going to answer more questions for us. So again, I appreciate you being here with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So this question I think is very important. Also, I think all the questions that we've gone over so far have been very, very important. But what type of challenges do you face in this field, and how do you overcome those?
Sure. Great question. And in terms of my role as athletic director and assistant principal, I think when we talked about this question, the first thing that popped into my head was just the ability to be flexible. Every day when I come into the office, something new is going to happen that day. We just got done with we're in the middle of the spring sports season, and you and I have talked about this, Zach, but when the weather doesn't cooperate, that presents a whole another set of challenges for that specific day. So I think just the ability to be flexible, the ability to sometimes do things, on the run, to be able to make accommodations, to have some organization and know what needs to be done. I think those are all things. And then when I think back to kind of the classroom, it tended to be obviously more student focused. The challenges were typically more student focused, whether that be a kid who maybe wasn't putting in their full potential and you were trying to pull them along to pass a class or to get a better grade, or maybe a difficulty with a parent in the classroom, a student that you had in the classroom. And like I said, now I think that's changed a little bit in my role as an administrator. Still deal with parents at times, but not in the classroom with students, 52 minutes a period, 7 periods a day, like I used to be. But certainly the challenges come up, and as I said before, just the ability to be flexible and work through them, and probably I guess also just problem solving and creating solutions is key.
So have any of these challenges that you've dealt with, affected you or changed really the way that you operate as an administrator or even as a teacher? Like has one of the challenges that you've run across really just impacted you so much that you just changed the way that you were doing things?
Yeah, I can think back to, when I was in the classroom and things that came up early on or came up consistently that I felt, I better change something, or it's kind of like you're banging your head against the wall at times. So if you don't adapt and adjust, it can be very frustrating for you or for the kids in your classroom. And then in terms of, administration, this is my second year here at Dixon High School, and I would say I found out early on, and just to give you an example of when the day starts and kids and teachers and coaches get here, my day gets really packed really quickly. Whether it just be people stopping in the office or an email or a text or a phone call of something that needs to be solved relatively soon. But you still have all the day-to-day things that have to get accomplished. So for example, just we'll say, scheduling or hiring of officials, something like that. Those things have to get accomplished. But I learned pretty early on in this job that my early morning before people got here and my late at night after everybody was gone, those were the times that I was going to get the day-to-day tasks accomplished. And it was the time during the day that really almost needed to be other than, outside of some scheduled meetings and things, but that time during the day was going to be taken up with new things that come up throughout the day. So I'd say in terms of my administrative roles here, that's probably been the biggest one that I've had to adjust and I guess fit my schedule to make it work with all the things that have to get done in a day.
Right. And I know 2 years ago when you just started, and I reached out to you and about doing photography.
Sure.
For the school, and I think you were at every single game after school. You tried to go to every game, and I think that's probably because you first started. You wanted to show face, but that's something I think that as an athletic director especially is extremely important. And I think if somebody else wanted to be an athletic director, that's a valuable asset as a person who's willing to essentially sacrifice their time, even your family.
Sure.
Had to take kind of a sacrifice with you not being there, but you were kind of going out to, like I said, at every game that you could, so parents knew who you were, so the students could see who you were, just to make sure that you were present.
Visible, yeah. I think you're exactly right. And I go back to something I said earlier. Education's a people industry. We're not creating product. It's not an assembly line. We're dealing with people every day. And essentially, when you talk about dealing with people, you're talking about relationships. You're talking about building relationships, building trust with people, showing people that you're invested. And I think that if someone out there is interested in getting into the field of education, I think you have to realize one of the knocks on education from those not in the field is, oh, you work 9 months a year, you get 2 weeks off at Christmas, you have a spring break, and sometimes it's in jest and sometimes not. But I'll say, if you're thinking about going into education or administration, if that's your mindset, I question how successful you're going to be. As you said, my first year when I took over, I would hate to know the number of contests that I went to, and I've scaled back a little bit this year. Partly by design, partly by some other things, but I think that's true with any field that you go into. If you want to be good at it, if you want to have the biggest impact, you need to be willing to sacrifice, and sometimes that's difficult. It's going out of town on a Tuesday night to watch an event when you'd rather maybe be home. But it is something that people that are thinking about this career need to understand. If you're going into it. If you want to be a coach or a teacher to some extent, and certainly an athletic director, there's no real office hours. You got to be available for people. I feel like I'm pretty good at it, but when a coach calls, if I don't answer right away, I get back with them as quickly as possible, because if it's something they're calling me about at 9 o'clock on a Wednesday night, it's important enough to them that I need to respond to them.
Right. And I kind of want to go back to what you said with making sacrifices, and then even go back further in what we've talked about so far with this series here. You make sacrifices, but you're making an impact on people's lives. You're making a huge impact on children's lives especially, and I think that's the value. Like, you as one single person, you're making a sacrifice. You may be losing out on, like you said, your Tuesday night, and,
right.
Your family may miss you or something for a little bit there, but you're affecting hundreds, thousands of kids, essentially. I mean, through the years, you've impacted thousands of kids, So I think that knowing that you have that power, that ability, is something very important that people should think about, because I think education is one of the most undervalued careers in society today. People do knock it often, but I don't think they quite realize how much you are impacting, their child's life,
right,
making a difference, and how much work that you guys actually do. Some only work 9 months out of the year, but when you're working those 9 months, you may be working 14, 16-hour days sometimes.
Right.
And I don't think they ever take that into consideration.
Sure. Yeah, and this gets said in coaching circles, which is my background, but certainly true for education in general. Is somebody in education, whether it be a teacher or a coach or an administrator, you have the ability to impact more people in one school year than a typical person does in their lifetime, just because of the interactions that you have on a day-to-day basis with, depending on your school, but 800 kids at Dixon High School, teachers, coaches, administrators, maintenance, custodial staff, secretaries. They interact with our kids here every day, and they can be positive, they can be negative, but ultimately there is an impact there one way or the other. So I think, it can't be understated that when you go into education, the tough part is, as I said earlier, you don't always get that reward up front. You don't always see it as it's happening, and sometimes you're in really difficult situations, and you wonder if you're making an impact. A kid makes poor choices repeatedly, and you're working with them to try to solve those things. But like I said, then lots of times later on down the road, you can you get that positive note or that letter, or maybe even you just ask somebody, hey, what's so and so doing now, and they talk about having a successful job or being married or having kids or whatever it is, and those are the things, the little payoffs that it is invaluable, really.